Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining Ask Me Anything session for the month of February. I'm Mohit. I'm a developer advocate here at Salesforce, and I want to welcome you all to this episode of Ask Me Anything. We have some amazing experts today, and today we'll be covering a very important tool, Code Analyzer, and we have amazing experts. You know what I love about our experts today, that we have experts from both product and engineering. So get in all your questions before I sort of hand off. Now before I begin, let me introduce our experts today. We have John and Rupa. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Mo. So I've been with Salesforce for 8 years. I spent quite a bit of time leading a team of ISV technical evangelists here in Europe. And today I am the PM for Salesforce Code Analyzer.
Thank you again, John, for joining. Rupa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hey everyone, I'm Rupa Mohan. I'm so glad to be here and talking to you all. I'm a principal software engineer at Salesforce. I've been with the Code Analyzer team ever since we started. It's been like three and a half years now. I've been with Salesforce for just over 11 years. It's been a long time here. It's been a great journey, and I'm super excited to talk to you all today about Code Analyzer.
Thank you again, Rupa and John, for joining and making time for all of our developer trailblazers out there. So again, get in all your questions today. Now, before we actually get into questions from you, I want all of us to be on the same page. So a lot of you might know what is Code Analyzer, but for a lot of you this might be a very new. So we have some content. So for next 10 minutes or so, we'll have John and Rupa walk us through presentation on Code Analyzer so that we all can be on same page. And once we are all on the same page, we'll take all of your questions, and we cannot wait for it. So John, over to you. Would you want to share your presentation, and then we can get through some content here?
Thank you, Mo. And no Salesforce presentation is ready without this particular slide. So please make your decisions based on features that are currently available as you consider your options for the future. I wanted to start by introducing our development team here with Austro, Cloudy, Mully, and Einstein. And imagine that this development team has just received a request for a new feature. This request gets picked up by Einstein, who writes a new Lightning Web component, an Apex controller to serve that Lightning Web component, and Mully does a peer review and QA, and the code moves forward in the development cycle, and through CI/CD, it gets promoted between environments. This ultimately gets to the customer reviews a feature against their acceptance criteria, and they happen not to be happy, so it actually goes back to Einstein for further work, and Einstein keeps hammering at it. After another cycle, the feature gets back to the customer, and customer finally signs off. However, while the code that Einstein wrote works correctly from the customer's point of view, it might not necessarily follow best practices. So maybe that code actually has a security vulnerability, maybe it's unstable, maybe it does not perform well, and will face scalability issues. So what we need to do is to get Einstein to fix these issues earlier in the development process, well before code even makes it to the customer, and definitely before the code causes any issues. So this means that we need to have quality gates throughout the DevOps process, starting with the individual developer, but also at the team level, integrated into their CI/CD. And that's what Code Analyzer is here to help Einstein with. So it empowers Einstein to write better code and keep code quality top of mind. It helps Einstein write secure code, code that performs well, code that follows best practices, code that is not prone to errors, and even refactoring code that is unnecessarily complex and helps to enforce code styles within the team. So what is this amazing thing called Code Analyzer? First of all, Code Analyzer is completely and absolutely free for all Salesforce customers and partners. It's a free scanner that unifies many different community-led open source code scanners into a single experience, and making more than 210 rules covering security, covering performance, covering complexity, and much more available for developers and architects to use. We have, for instance, PMD, a very well-known code scanner for Apex, CPD, the copy-paste detector that helps you identify opportunities to refactor your code, retire.js to identify vulnerable JavaScript libraries, 3 different ESLint engines for JavaScript, TypeScript, Lightning Web Components, and finally, our own Salesforce Graph engine, an engine that deeply understands Apex code and therefore detects more advanced problems in Apex. And Code Analyzer plugs into the Salesforce CLI, making it incredibly easy for an individual developer such as Einstein to use it. This said, we strongly recommend that teams actually plug Code Analyzer directly into their preferred CI/CD platform so they can actually continuously scan code as they develop. And to learn more about many ways Code Analyzer scans code, here's Rupa.
Thanks, John. So yeah, John mentioned a lot of these different backend engines we have, right? Like PMD, ESLint. So a lot of these go through an approach where it breaks down each file into an abstract syntax tree. So abstract syntax tree is like a hierarchical representation of the code. So it's like an equivalent of each class. Abstract syntax tree is AST for short. And this approach is really effective in catching topical issues. So if there is an issue that we can detect by just looking at the hierarchy, this approach is really good, and it's also super lightweight. It's like super quick, and then it just gets done. But then anytime we want to catch a more complex issue that spans across multiple files, this approach is, maybe we can make it work, but it's kind of challenging to actually get it work. It's not really intuitive to handle multiple files with this. So another approach that we have that John just showed up. So this is called data flow analysis. It's not all that common just because it's pretty challenging to implement. And why is this challenging? Because it requires the analyzer to assimilate the entire code base, not just one file, two files, like the entire code base, and then it takes it as a single unit. And then it attempts to understand how the control graph flows through this. And then at every point, it tries to predict how data transforms. So all of this while actually not executing code, it kind of simulates code execution without actually executing code. So this full picture aspect makes this a really good fit to identify more complex issues. So let's look at a code example. Awesome, thanks, John. So in this, what we have is a simple method, say hello, it's an Apex method, and then it takes a string parameter, name, and then it says hello to that name. Let's say, we want our analyzer to detect if this code can throw a null pointer error. As a human, you look at this, I'm sure you already know where the problem is. But then the static analyzer is not human, right? So it needs to go through some programmatic steps to actually get there. And then it goes through the hierarchy of the entire code. So it will pretty much look at each line. So John, if you can click through each line. So it just looks at, there's a string, sure. And then there's an if condition, sure. There's a string, there's a system debug. It doesn't really, understand what's going on here, but rather it looks at the structural integrity of this code and not really help us detect the null pointer error. Now, if the same thing is handled by data flow analysis, you can see that, so it first starts off with the method declaration, and then it says, okay, you have something called name. I don't know what value is being set for that name. So let me just assume that, this is an indeterminate. I don't know what this name parameter is. And then it cautiously just starts walking path 1. And then in line 3, it notes down that, okay, you have something, a string variable called str, and then that's being set to null. And then it sees this if condition. And then it already knows, okay, there is this name parameter. I don't know what the value is. But just for now, let me assume that this condition was true. And then if this was true, it goes to line 5. And then at line 5, notes down that str is assigned a actual value. It's not null anymore. So by the time it gets to line 6, it knows that this 2 lowercase is just invoked on this str, and then it prints hello name, right? But then it also knows, okay, I made an assumption at line number 4 that this condition was true. What happens if this condition was false? So it starts off with a second path, and then it again goes to line 3, where it notices that str is null. And then for the if condition at line number 4, it assumes this evaluates to false. So let's directly jump to line number 6. And then, yeah, you can invoke a method on null that's going to throw a null pointer. So yeah, you can probably see how this transforms data through the flow and then detects null pointer exception. So my point being, this is automatically a lot more complex, and that's exactly what we have implemented in Graph Engine. And this is the newest engine to join the backend of Salesforce Code Analyzer. It pretty much performs data flow analysis on Apex that we just spoke about. And this means it can understand source code as a picture put together. So it can trace which method instantiates which class, and then it knows that not all instances of a single class are the same, because each of these can have their own state. It knows that a static variable is different from a non-static variable. It understands different scopes, tries to make sense of hierarchy, inheritance, and all of this. Overall, it can handle a lot more complexity than an average static analyzer. So this automatically leads on to its capability to detect issues that are more complex than an average AST-based static analyzer. Now, I do have to acknowledge that just because we have a sledgehammer, we use it on every small nail. So there are there are cases where it's just the simple abstract syntax tree analysis is the best fit. Things that are super small and lightweight, it's just good at what it does. At the same time, path-based analysis is really heavy. It can do a lot of heavy lifting. It also is pretty heavy on the resources and slower, obviously, because of the work it has to do. So as a middle ground, we've introduced a third type of analysis that we call graph-based analysis. So graph-based analysis has a little bit of both worlds, so it can look at a bigger picture of the of all of the source code ASTs put together. It doesn't go as far as building paths, but instead it allows us to query for certain conditions where this data spans multiple ASTs, and then it can find out information that are a little more niche than abstract syntax tree analysis, but a little less detailed than graph analysis. Looks like we lost. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. Okay, so as of today, we have 3 different rules from Graph Engine. In general, Graph Engine can detect credf violation. We've been talking about this a lot. Credf violation has been pretty elusive just because of its complexity. It's not as simple as looking at a file, and having data flow analysis capability has given us the power to detect credf violations more reliably. I might even say it's probably more accurate than any other static analyzer out there. I know that's a bold statement, but that's kind of true the way it is today. And credf violations are the most common violations that don't get detected. So until someone actually goes to the security review, and then that's when there is even this notion that this was not even covered before. And we want to make sure our users have this power, and that's exactly why we've implemented it. Also, we have 2 more rules, performance-based rules, through graph-based analysis. So this can detect unused or dead code. So usually unused code is a performance deterrent, especially in a cloud setup, just because this is competing with code that's actually used, all of that for compilation resources, and this code is not even used, so it doesn't it's probably better if this doesn't exist for everyone. So we have the unused methods rule. So this covers a few simple cases of unused methods. We are iteratively adding newer scenarios to make this cover more scenarios of unused methods. There is also unimplemented types rule. This can identify interfaces and abstract classes when they don't have any implementation. So let's say you define this abstract class, but it's not really implemented anywhere. That's still dead code. Maybe it can be included at a later point. Next slide, please. All right, so yeah, pretty much that's the only thing remaining is for you to try it out. If you haven't tried it, like John said, it's free, it's open source, and it's just a single Salesforce CLI command. You do SFDX plugins install at Salesforce/SFDX scanner. That's pretty much all it takes to install it. And there is also a shortened link to documentation. We've been putting information on how to use the plugin, and then every time we make a release, we also put release notes on what's changing, the new features that's coming up, so you can keep up with that to know what's going on with that. Mo, so I'll hand it off to you now. Hey, we can't really hear you, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you so much for pointing that out. We were getting some echo, so I had to move. So I think we've lost feed with John for a sec here, but we will try to get John on the feed ASAP. Till then, we'll have lots of questions for you, Rupa. So you will be fielding lots of questions. So let's actually get into the Q&A here and see what we can sort of answer for our audience here. So let's move on to our first question here. That's actually a question that came from Twitter from someone, Ravi. So Ravi, thanks for a question. So the question is, how is this code analyzer different from PMD?
Okay. PMD is one of the engines that Code Analyzer comprises of. So think about it this way: that PMD on its own is really great. It can cover a lot of languages. It has its own specific approach to analyzing code. But then there is also ESLint, which
Yeah.
possesses some powers that PMD does not. And then there is Retire.js, which looks at another aspect. So PMD is one of the backend engines for Code Analyzer. So we can't really distinguish them, but you can think of Code Analyzer as a wrapper around PMD and a few other engines. And then it gives a sense of using a single tool instead of all these different multiple tools. Welcome back, John.
Yeah,
Thank
welcome
you.
back, John. And this is a question from Osik. I think 3 Osik, maybe coded name here. But the question, and I think this is a question for you, John. So Osik is very interested in using the code analyzer in his project. He's asking, are there any resources like API documentation, examples, or blog post on how to do that? If not, are we planning to publish something around that topic?
Yes. So first of all, we have a number of blog posts, and more. I'm sure we can share all of that. We have our publicly available documentation that Rupa was sharing earlier in our slide deck, and also we have our public GitHub repo. Bear in mind that Salesforce Code Analyzer is an open source project, so you can actually go there and download the entire repo, which contains sample projects to get you started and experimenting with scanning that repo for vulnerabilities and see how the rules perform. You're muted again. Well.
Yeah, the mute buttons. So again, thank you, John, for answering that. Now, so there is a follow-up question from Osik on he wants to build some sort of a dependency graph for Apex classes. That is, it sounds like the graph engine is better solution than using our tooling API or dependency API. So is this possible with Salesforce Graph Engine? That's the question. I think this is a question more for you, Rupa. Like, is there a way they can leverage already existing code that's out there and kind of build this dependency graph for their Apex classes?
I think there is a possibility. So right now we don't really have a way to add custom rules on Graph Engine. I think that's the only thing stopping an effort like this, because the way Graph Engine is today, it does have information on which classes invoke which other classes. So there should be a way to build this kind of a uh, dependency diagram. But yeah, we're trying to open up custom rules somewhere down the line. So at that point, I think it'll be easy enough to include features like these.
Got it. And this is question coming from Sumant Nayak. Sumant, thank you so much for your question. And this is, I'll like to, sort of move this question to John. Over to you. So, John, Sumant is interested in finding out if this code analyzer can be integrated with Git or third-party tools like Copado.
Yeah, very well. Or we actually have, and this is an actual community-led project. We have a number of GitHub actions that contributors have created that anyone can use. If you go to our public documentation under CI/CD, you'll see that we point to those GitHub actions. So you can start to plug and play with that. We are also working with a number of CI/CD providers to get Code Analyzer integrated into those tools. So
Wonderful.
stay tuned as we expand our collection of CI/CD integrations.
Wonderful, wonderful. And this question is from Hector. Hector, thank you so much for being on the show today and also asking your question. So they are telling that whether this needs to be manually integrated to our DevOps pipeline. And this is a follow-up question, I think, John, based on the previous question. Like, is this needs to be integrated manually to your DevOps pipeline, or like, there's like automated way to do this?
Well, it depends. Again, for certain CI/CD, we have some accelerators that you can use, right?
Yes.
But regardless, given that we surface code analyzers through the CLI,
Yes.
it's really easy to integrate it with any CI/CD. So basically, your CI/CD will need to execute certain commands, process the output that code analyzer generates, and make it available to you. It will potentially be scheduled to run on say a nightly basis when we're talking about scanning code with more complex rules like the ones from Graph Engine, or just scanning it on every exchange.
Got it. Thank you again, John. And this is for you, Rupa. So this question is from Rakesh. Rakesh, thank you for the question. Is there a list of all the rules covered by Code Analyzer somewhere?
Yeah, you can just do sfdx scanner rule list. That's a scanner rule list command that we have, which will just list down all the rules, and then it will also show which engine that's on. So if you want to look at a rule in more detail, you can do the scanner rule describe and then provide the rule name. So if you look at our usage documentation, right, you can find out how to, like, what kind of parameters to pass, and then you can get pretty detailed information on all of this. I just want to add here. So once you execute, and then you have this rule that shows up like a violation, and you're not sure what it actually means, we are also including links to information about that rule. So you don't even have to know which rules are run. You execute it against your code, you look at your violation list, and then there is this link about each rule violation. Click that, and then that's going to give you information from the actual engine. So for example, PMD would show its own documentation on why such and such is a violation and how we can fix this code.
Got it. Thank you. And this is more of a strategic question, so I think it's more to the product team here, John. So it is for you. So this is coming from Chris. So Chris is wondering, can other static analyzers be used with this such a code scan or check marks?
We do not integrate with additional and commercial code scanners directly, right? But if you are using Code Analyzer as part of a CI/CD integration, you can definitely use additional scanners as part of your DevOps process, right? So it is possible for you to do that. Just bear in mind that the results would not necessarily be naturally merged from within Code Analyzer.
Got it. Thank you again, John, for this. Let's look if there are any more questions. I'm pretty sure the community is coming up with a lot of questions. So one of the questions that I have, and this is for you, John, is, I as a developer, right, I use this code scanner, Apex PMD, I think it's called, and I integrate within my Visual Studio Code when I'm like coding. It has a squiggly notation where it just tells me that here's where the errors are. So are there any extensions that are out planned for this specific product, like Code Analyzer? I know it's CLI. People can run this on their CI/CD pipelines or run it manually from their command line. But when are they going to get that experience of having it integrated in their development workflow right within the VS Code.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a critical part of getting those results of Colonizer within the IDE as you develop and optimize your code. We definitely have plans to do that.
Okay.
What I would say is stay tuned, and
Mhm.
over the next few weeks, you will hopefully hear more about our plans for that.
Yeah. And this is an amazing question, actually, and very relevant to what is happening in industry in general. So I would like to answer myself, and then have John, you answer it, and Rupa, you answer it. So there's a question from Rakesh, that any plans of making code analyzer smart by integrating with GPT AI tools. GPT AI tools are a hot topic. So I would like to say something. There is definitely something at TDX. I'm really excited to learn about it. So stay tuned, I would say, to TDX, and I'll ask the same question to you, John. Is there anything in your product, in your roadmap, something like this?
I would agree with your statement. So definitely stay tuned for TDX. There will be a lot of exciting news being shared there. What I would say is that at the end of the day, there are many ways by which developers can come up with code. Right? It can be their brain. It can be Stack Overflow or something along those lines.
Yeah.
It can be generative AI.
Mm-hmm.
That code gets created, but it does not necessarily comply with coding best practices or with whatever standards you should be aiming to do. We know, for instance, that ChatGPT, when generating Apex code, does have some limitations, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So combining those tools with the likes of code analyzer as part of your development process, as part of your CI/CD, as we've been saying today, is going to be critical, regardless of how that code comes into being in the first place. And yes, I do see scope for further integration with AI capabilities for code analyzer.
Got it.
Yeah, I probably I go with what John said. So no matter who writes the code, right, AI or human, there is still a possibility of missing a few things that can be detected by a tool like Code Analyzer. So I think no matter the AI, maybe for detection, maybe we can grow into a path where ASTs are consumed by a tool like ChatGPT, and then the GPT would crunch these ASTs and then start detecting patterns. I'm not sure if we are ready for that yet, but surely, no matter who writes the code, yeah, we
Yeah.
should be able to detect issues.
Got it. Got it. And this is a question coming from Sumant Nayak. And this is for you, Rupa. I know you have reviewed a lot of code in that code base. So this question is, what language is the engine, the graph engine that you're talking about, written in?
Graph Engine is written in Java.
Okay.
Out of Java, it's we have a layer of TypeScript around it. So Node.js is what Code Analyzer is written in, and then Code Analyzer would hand it off to different engines in the backend. And
Got it.
Graph Engine specifically is written in Java.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Again, Java is very close to, I think, Salesforce developers, because Apex, you can think of Apex, pretty much like Java, although, obviously we have some differences in how it's compiled, etc. But yeah, TypeScript and Java. And I would want to remind everyone here on this call that this whole code base, right, is open source. That means you have access to the code base yourself, and you should be pretty much able to fork it. If you see there is an opportunity to improve the code base, submit the PR. We have Rupa and the team who will help us, and John, obviously from product strategy, to make sure to get this feature, have, and also use the issues tab there to raise some issues, and feature request as well. We're always listening for it.
And discussions. Go to GitHub, ask questions, contribute to the community. Our GitHub is reasonably active, so we'd like to see more people going there and engaging with us, and us engaging with them as well.
Got it. Got it. There's a question from John Daniel. John Daniel is one of our MVP and very respected member of the community. So, John, thank you so much for joining. He has a really interesting question. Is this tool the next evolution of the dependency API? Is it building off of that work? So I want to leave some more context here for you, Rupa and John. So dependency API is an API that's offered by the tooling API team. So really that API, what it does is, let's say you have an Apex class that depends on, say, custom objects, other metadata types in Salesforce. It kind of gives you like the whole dependency graph. Now that API has always been in beta. It never came out in public because what I've heard internally is it's really hard to build those kind of APIs because it has to scan all of our metadata, and it has to spider through all the metadata chain. So it never actually made. So is there any connection at all with the graph engine here, Rupa?
Not really. So Graph Engine uses the Apex Jorge compiler.
Okay.
The jar has been available open source for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much uses the Jorge compiler to compile code for us.
Got it.
And then thereon it takes over. We don't really have any connection to the core as to where the code is running on the Salesforce CRM. There's just no, so it can pretty much be any code base that you have. You don't need to have a user login. You don't need to have a connection to your org out there, production org. You can just get any like single piece of Apex class and then run it on that. So this
Got it.
doesn't depend on the dependency API.
Got it.
And Rupa, question for you: would we be able to use the graph database to identify those dependencies within the code?
I think we should be. This is certainly worth digging in a little bit and then seeing, because we have a lot of the basic information available. We just have to be smart about what we query for and then what we find.
Got
This
it.
seems like something we might be able to.
Okay, so maybe a feature request, on GitHub could be added, and then we add it
Yeah.
to our backlog. Hopefully, at some point in the future, we can look into it.
Yeah, I think I would say, go and add your feature request there on the GitHub tab and discussions. I'll be happy to discuss it. So we have another question coming from 3OSIC. 3OSIC has lots of questions today. Thank you again. So one of the graph engine limitation is that the graph engine does not scan triggers. That's what 3OSIC says. Rupa, is there a feature plan to be released in the future?
Yeah, it's been long pending.
Got
Yeah,
it.
yeah. It should be, yeah, it's something that we've been trying to prioritize for a while now, and yeah, that is certainly in the roadmap to be done.
Got it. Got it. And yeah, I would like to say that generally as a developer, right? I recommend people to like keep your triggers like very lean. Just have trigger definitions and then delegate all of the logic to an Apex class. That's generally the best practice, because you cannot have lots. If you try to put lots of code within the same trigger, right? It really becomes difficult to manage later on yourself. So as an architectural best practice, we always recommend that you have like a trigger which just delegates all of the functionality or the business logic to a class which has all the business logic. So that way, your trigger is very lean. You can get the code coverage pretty easily for that. Then you have a dedicated class, where you can further like sort of modularize things. So that's just a general best practice that I want to call out. And this is a question coming from Venkat. Venkat, shout out to you for asking us this very important question. So as a developer, is there a way to suppress certain false positive so that they don't keep showing up whenever I trigger the static analysis?
Yeah, we have something called so each engine. Let me first back up. I'm assuming this is not just for Graph Engine, but for PMD, ESLint, and all of. So each of these engines have a mechanism by which it can tell the backend. So PMD has these suppress warnings, and ESLint has comments. Graph Engine has something called engine directives as well, which also look like comments. These comments are specifically structured to say this specific rule on this engine is something that I don't want to run for either the next line or this method or this entire class. So
Got it.
you can look at our documentation to find out more information, especially for Graph Engine, but even for PMD and ESLint, they have really good documentation around how to suppress these violations. And then, so though I would recommend, if you see a violation, think of, is it really a violation or not before you go and
Yes.
suppress. I know sometimes we are in a hurry to get through it, and then
Yeah.
blocking the pipeline is just very annoying. But yeah, give it thought, and then if you're sure it's a false positive, go for it, block it. And for Graph Engine, if you do see false positives, create an issue for us. Let us know. We want to make sure Graph Engine has pretty reliable information. If it throws a false positive, we want to know about it so we can go and fix it.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, and this question is coming from Vivek. Does Code Analyzer run custom validations check as well to validate if the code being scanned follows all the necessary custom test conditions? I think this is asking if custom validations can be written with the Code Analyzer.
Custom validation as in custom rules
Custom
that
rules,
can.
I think it
I
is.
assume
Custom.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, for Graph Engine, we don't have a way to add custom rules.
Got it.
But then PMD and ESLint do have that.
Yes.
And we also support that through Code Analyzer. So if you have your custom rules, there are mechanisms through which you can add it for these engines and then be able to run it.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So this is another question from Sumant Nayak, more of a DevOps question, I would say, it says that let's say we set up scan on every commit. Okay, will this slow down things? Already we experience slowness due to tests running. So it looks like this is a very complex project where they're trying to run this rule engine on every commit, which I don't think sounds like a good idea. I think PRs would be the right way. Um, and if you want to run something, I would say locally run it. But I would like to hear your experience on this, Rupa.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mo. So yeah, anytime. I mean, it's okay if you can. If you have the patience for each commit, that's totally with you. But then given the complexity of code, it's probably a good idea to run per PR. In my experience, I would probably send a commit without really going through all the violations. But then by the time I'm ready to finish the PR, I want to make sure that I have newer commits to fix things that I did earlier. So even in that aspect, it feels like having it for a PR is better. That said, so the standard run command, which is the non-graph engine part, that is pretty quick. So it's probably not too heavyweight. Though for the data flow analysis part, it might be better to hold off for a PR.
Got it. Got it. And John, this is a question for you. Is how can I prevent out of memory errors? I think some of our users are getting that, like out of memory errors.
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of background there because we released our Graph Engine officially in October last year. And Rupa and the team have done an amazing amount of work to get that over the line and available. But it did start to face some kind of scalability issues with very complex apps and complex code bases, right? And I think, Rupa, you might have some news on that to share, right?
I do, yeah. So we've been so over the last release as well and the upcoming release, we have some optimizations made,
Yes.
and then this is going to decrease the occurrence of out of memory for sure. It's also it just as a side effect, it kind of got a little faster. I'm surprised that came by, but that's certainly a happy win for us.
Right.
And so for the upcoming release, we have some specific ways for you to get more results than you were getting before. We're trying to ensure that the code doesn't run into out of memory, but instead it fails fast. Anytime it sees that the path it's walking is getting more complex and it's about to run into an out of memory, it preemptively stops processing that path, goes to the next path, and then the the recommended way for you would be to go run just the failed paths, the paths that did not complete, with a higher allocation to get that to completion. So we're including some documentation around that that's coming up very soon. Stay tuned. Look at our release notes. Maybe in the next couple of weeks or more.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
certainly within the next month you should be seeing a fix for this.
Got
It
it.
still wouldn't fix, but then given that this is a problem that we have to live with, it gives a workaround to get through better.
Got it. And this is for I'm assuming a very bigger code base, I guess.
Yeah, and even if it's a smaller code base, so unrelated to the size, right? Anytime
Okay.
there are multiple method calls and then a
Got it.
lot of if else ladders, would just, so anytime there is an if else, the number of paths just double.
Got it.
And so I've seen some code. The code works very well, but then there is like this really long if else ladder,
Mm-hmm.
and then those are the ones which are those are the ones that Graph Engine stumbles on, and then it has trouble getting through those quickly.
Got it.
And it's also not a very great practice to have a lot of if else. So
Yeah.
even code writing perspective, maybe the code can be refactored such that it doesn't have so many forks.
Yeah, I
So
mean, there's strategy patterns, that our developers can use. Specifically in Salesforce, right? We always recommend that you can use, some kind of a custom metadata-driven development where you can have your conditions kind of sitting on the custom metadata, and then best you have a strategy in place which kind of looks at that record and says, okay, I want to pick this specific logic, so it just calls that specific Apex class. That's one way to deal with it, is like have a strategy pattern whenever you have like lots of these if else statements, something that
yeah.
I wanted to add. So there is a question coming from Jefferson, and I think we have answered it. John answered it, but I just want to take this again and repeat it. So the question from Jefferson is, what are the plans to launch and display violations from Code Analyzer into Visual Studio Code or any other IDEs? I think we answered it at the
Yeah,
beginning.
we did. As we said, stay tuned over the next few weeks. Listen to what is going to be said at Trailblazer DX,
Yes.
and I'm sure there will be some good news there.
Awesome. Cool. So the next question is again for you, John. So we have lots of ISV developers here, and they want to use the code analyzer for App Exchange security review. What's our thought process on that? Can they use it, and how would they sort of report that thing?
All right. So we are making incremental progress to get these code analyzer deeper and deeper integrated into security review process. We are working closely with our own security review team to help them even contribute back to the community in terms of some of the rules they put together. We continue to work closely with them. The code analyzer at this point in time is not an officially accepted kind of scanner, so you cannot just simply run a report and submit your app with a code analyzer report, but we do want to get there. So we will continue to work closely with that team and hopefully come up with a much better and much more integrated process to help our partners go through security review.
Yeah, and a follow-up question on that from Adrian. So Adrian is like, can it work alongside a focused Salesforce code security scanner called DigitSec? I've not heard of it. This is like my first time hearing, but I think in general, like, I think it'll be really interesting to get your thought, John, on how are we sort of integrating with like third-party scanning solutions that are there on App Exchange or in general in the market for code scanning.
Yeah, well, I think we touched on that earlier. We are not integrating with commercial scanners at this point in time, right?
Got it.
The option is always there for them to integrate with us and to leverage code analyzer results within their own applications.
Got it.
But those conversations will continue to happen, and we'll see where that leads us.
Awesome. This is a question from 3Osik again, and this is for you, Rupa. Is there any documentation for the TypeScript interface for the Salesforce Graph Engine? If not, is there any plan to publish those kind of documentation?
I'm not sure if I fully understand.
Yeah,
So
so let me break down that for you. So you said that the Graph Engine uses some kind of a TypeScript interfaces. I think it might be internal interfaces. So they're looking for some kind of a typed doc on that.
oh, okay. So yeah, all of this code is open source.
Okay.
You can just poke it. You can look at it. So we have something called rule engine interface. If you're specifically looking at the code to see how you can add a new engine, have a look at the rule engine interface on TypeScript.
Got it.
And anytime we add a new engine, we go implement another class. That's based on this interface, and then we are able to plug in that. So we've been like, it's been a long time wish for us to have users be able to add their own engines as well. It has been non-trivial. We haven't been able to get there yet, but if
Got
you're
it.
interested in forking and then adding your own engine, I think you should still be able to do that by just looking at the open source code. And our code in general is pretty well self documented. Ask us questions if you're having trouble, and we're happy to answer.
Okay, and this is a question from Ravi. Ravi wants to shout out to all the amazing sessions and our wonderful product. Ravi, we are really grateful for you. Thank you for all your love. So the question is, should we download all the code to local machine, or is there a server where we can run this code scanner, code analyzer?
Well, I mean, typically you'd be using the code analyzer as a plugin to Salesforce CLI. So there is a process to get that plugin installed. This is for you to actually actively use the plugin while you are developing. There are ways for you to, of course, integrate code analyzer into your CI/CD. That CI/CD might be running in a VM somewhere, depending on which CI/CD we are talking about. But this said, we know this is an open source project. You can download the entire code base, and it will contain a whole bunch of resources and assets that you can look into, including example codes where you can test out the various rules that we have.
Awesome. And I would like to add something here. Somebody might be tempted to put all these things on a public server and expose this so somebody can just upload their code, and then you have scanned output and results. I think the problem with that is security that I see here. Uploading your code to some other untrusted server might something that you want to really think through before you kind of agree to, put your source code somewhere on the public internet. I just want to add my security hat there and add some things there.
I just want to add one more thing.
Yeah.
So um, many of the CI/CDs, right, like GitHub Actions and all of these,
Yeah.
they have their own capability to spawn a VM. Circle CI has that too. So how we have been doing CI/CD is so anytime there is a PR, it would go put that code on the VM, and then onto that VM it would install Salesforce CLI and then the code analyzer, and then execute it. You can take a look at the GitHub Actions in our open source repository if you want an example. So that is still private to you. That is still not on your machine, especially for something like data flow analysis. I don't think you want to like hold up your machine to take so long and then execute things. It's just easier to have a VM on a CI/CD system do that for you every day. And then when you have specific violations, you can target that specific violation instead of running the whole world. That's just going to make things easier for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a follow-up question on that. I was thinking there is some sort of a product within Salesforce that we are working on that's gonna make this easier and make it available inside the cloud. I don't know, we codenamed it as Apex Guru or something. Do any of you have any insights into that, or you don't?
We do. we would say to stay tuned for Trailblazer DX
Okay, got
and
it.
listen to the news that we're going to be sharing there.
Got it. So there's a question from Jefferson here. Are there plans to detect assert calls inside of a separate classes instead of the test class? That's pretty interesting. Like usually the asserts are written within the test class. Now I don't know the reasons why someone would write assert outside the text context, but I think there is a possibility where somebody might write. So are there any plans to create some kind of a rule for that is the question here.
If that rule seems important enough, go ahead and create a feature request for us. This sounds like something that even PMD can detect.
I think so. Yeah, I think PMD would be able to do, and you should be able to write like a custom path expression or something like that and build your own sort of a rule. Um, I would want to say that I think we need more enablement on PMD itself, specifically like how to write custom rules. So something that our advocacy team will work for sure in the upcoming future, to give some content to the community to learn all these kind of tools.
And let me just say that we work reasonably closely with PMD team, and it would be great if people are writing rules to contribute back to the PMD community to continue to increase the number of rules available in that engine.
Yeah, I would really recommend. So if you have a rule in mind, take a look at how PMD recommends writing custom rules. You can write custom rules and add it to code analyzer as well. And then once you know that it's working well for you, go ahead, create an issue, uh, create a PR with PMD, and they have a really awesome community. They're super friendly. They review code for us, and then they give us great feedback. So, highly recommend if you have custom rules already and you think it's going to be useful for everyone. It's pretty much like that would come back to code analyzer, and that gets a part in
Got it.
here as well. So,
Got it.
do that.
Awesome. There is a question, and I don't know this thing term myself. Like, could this be used in place of SAST tool? SAST tool. I think this is the first time I've heard about
The
it.
static analyzer, right? Any static analyzer is SAST. Is
Okay,
that
got it.
could be? Yeah. What was the
So
question?
the question
Sorry.
is, how well does it detect security vulnerabilities? Like, can this be used in place of any static analyzer tool, and how well does this detect security vulnerabilities?
Um,
Yeah,
You want
John,
to,
Joy.
yeah, yeah, let me just address it
Yeah,
real quickly. So yes, this was actually built from scratch to be a security tool, right?
got it.
Yeah. Since we started launching some security rules, we've also expanded our rule set to touch on subjects such as performance, and we will continue to do that. But one thing that is really top of mind for Rupa and I is to continue closing the gap between Salesforce Code Analyzer and the rule sets that are provided through the various engines and some of the other tools that our customers might be actually using. So
Got it.
definitely, yeah, if you definitely think about Code Analyzer as something that can help you write secure code, it will detect security vulnerabilities, some of which are very advanced and very hard for some of the other tools to detect, such as CRUD-FLS. We are particularly good at that, right? And we will continue investing in that. Now, there are some gaps still. We are aware. We are continuing to invest in addressing those.
Got it. And I think this is very important question again coming from Jefferson is, are there plans to detect access tokens and sort of flag them similar to how GitHub does their security, for instance, right? Whenever you commit a code which has like an access token or a token, it just detects it and then lets us know. Is there any plan for that within the
I'm
scan?
pretty sure we have that in our backlog around detection of secrets, right?
Yes.
yeah,
Uh,
we have this. The complexity here is that Apex does not indicate a specific syntax to show that something is a secret. So it could just be a variable anywhere, and
Yeah.
then maybe we can make a blind guess based on the name of the variable.
Yeah.
But this is not something that can be easily implemented. Like John said, it's something we've been meaning to get to, but there isn't a concrete way that we've been able to figure out to
Yeah.
go and
Yeah.
implement this.
Yeah, makes sense. I think in general, right, we recommend developers as a best practice to use things like named credential, because
yeah.
that way, what happens is your tokens are all there. Salesforce manages behind the scene. We don't even expose that tables to external developers or any developers. In fact, it's all taken care within Salesforce database securely for you. You just use the name credential name there. So I think, and there is a PMD rule actually which checks that if you're writing like an HTTP call out and you have an HTTP in your code, it just makes sure that you are using the named credential. So I think that might be the good rule to look at and use in your scanners. But explicitly, like as Rupa was saying, if somebody uses like some kind of a token or a flag, might be something to look at. I would want to add something here, Rupa, is one other way would be, so because we are scanning the code and we don't actually scan the metadata. I mean, PMD can do, you can write rules on any file, you can write rules on XML, right? So metadata is an XML. So I would look for some metadata, like for example, I know that like name credential or auth provider, things like that uses token. So just making sure that we can scan that and detect that there was no token in there committed to the GitHub. So I think this is more of a rule where you should rely more on the source control uh, rather than I think code scanner. You know,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
my opinion
But,
on
but again, if PMD has those capabilities, Code
it. Does.
Analyzer will do the same. So
Got it. This is a question from Santosh. Along with Apex, does this also analyze LWC, Aura components? And they're also thinking about how about flows?
oh, we always get the flows question. So yes, for everything except flows at the moment. That's what I will say. This said, we do support evocable Apex, which you can evoke through flows. So so our graph engine will consider that too. Flows is something that we have on our backlog.
Yeah, there is a question where somebody is asking about Salesforce functions. Now, just to set the context, Salesforce functions is our product where the code is not Apex, it's JavaScript and Java and Python, obviously with the latest support. So they're saying, can this analyzer, code analyzer, work on those languages as well?
Yeah, it can pretty much take. So if you have code out there in any language that PMD can handle today, you can go ahead and get it scanned. For JavaScript, we have ESLint, which can go detect issues. So it doesn't matter what code it is. If you have extensions code content that code analyzer can understand through these different tools, it can scan it for you.
Got it. Got it. And again, this is a question coming from Ethan. Ethan, thank you so much for the question. Are there plans to able to detect security vulnerabilities along or across the stack trace versus just the individual file changed? I think this is unclear to me. I mean, it sounded unclear, but I think I can assume that this is about can we scan for the security vulnerabilities on the full code base.
I,
Yeah,
I
which is what graph engine does.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So graph engine was created precisely to understand the entire code base, to understand multiple files, that the
Got it.
transaction
Yep.
goes through multiple files, and that helps us identify vulnerabilities that normal static analysis cannot find.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Yeah. So this was our last question actually for the show. We unfortunately are out of time. I think we are almost 3 minutes into, winding this out. But what an amazing session! Actually, lots of learning. Thank you again, John and Rupa. I'll like to hear some final comments, John, on you on what's upcoming and what should developers sort of look for at TDX with code scanner and all these capabilities that you just
Good, good,
talked
good.
about.
Well, definitely stay tuned to Trailblazer DX. Stay tuned to the keynote. And if you're there on the second day, please join Rupa and I for our session on Salesforce Code Analyzer. We'll go deeper. We'll see demos, and it's going to be quite interesting session with time for Q&A as well. And we are more than happy to sit down with you guys afterwards and and answer any additional questions you might have.
Yeah, Rupa, over to you.
Yeah, I think this has been such a great session. I'm just so glad that everybody's so enthusiastic and having so many different questions. And I felt like this was super action packed. And Mo, you did amazing calling
Thank
out
you.
the questions and helping us focus on just what to answer. So I hope it's been useful for you all. Do create. Do talk to us. You can talk to us through our discussions, or you can create issues. Try out the code analyzer. That's probably the best way to even understand what's going on. And then I'm sure you're going to have great ideas, feature requests. Let us know, and that really helps us create a direction that we want this product to go through.
Yeah, yeah. I would like to conclude by saying that this is probably, I mean, I tweeted yesterday that this probably is one of my favorite, I'm biased, but one of my favorite products out there because it directly affects the productivity of us as developers. So,
Yeah.
it just boosts our productivity right away, even for end users, it keeps code from away from all the security vulnerabilities. So this definitely is one of the products. I'm glad we did this and really looking forward to this product. And I would like to wind up by this slide that I'm presenting here. So for all of you out there, if you have not joined our community, do join us on our developer trailblazers. Connect with all of the developer trailblazers on our community. There is this link for the URL, and we plan to get all of these AMA sessions every month with different developer advocates, different our panels and experts and topics, right? So this is all planned. So if you have any feedback, let us know, and feel free to use our hashtag #SFDevsAMA. Again, from all of us here, I want to take a moment and thank you, and we will see you in the upcoming episode and also at TDX. Don't forget. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mo.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.